Hey guys, welcome back. So the last few years, I've been going through a number of different handguns trying to find that perfect handgun. People will say on social media, why do you carry so many different guns? Because I can. It's my job to evaluate new firearms and see what I think about them. So the last couple of years, I've been going through trying to figure out what handgun I wanted to carry. I'm gonna talk about a few of those handguns in this video, talk about why I've stopped carrying them and gone back to a single action, double action handgun. And in that process, because I like the CZ handguns, I thought, well, this would be a perfect opportunity to pick up the new Shadow 2 Compact as a possible carry candidate. But this has some pretty serious problems if you're considering this handgun for concealed carry, and we'll also talk about that in today's video. So let's get started talking about my journey down the concealed carry path, why I've chosen the various guns that I've chosen, why I've changed back to a double action, single action handgun. A lot of folks ask me, how can I get involved in the firearms business in that particular community? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a gunsmith. Every gunsmith I know is just overbooked with work. It's a very good living. And so if you would like to become a gunsmith, you need to go to a gunsmithing school or become an apprentice for an existing gunsmith. But Modern Gun School is an accredited college that also works with veterans in the GI Bill, where you can go and get a degree from accredited college in gunsmithing and then go out and start your own gunsmithing business, which I think is a really great option. Again, throughout my entire life, gunsmiths have always been able to earn a really good living, assuming they have a really strong work ethic. So please check out Modern Gun School. I do have a link in the video description below. So many years ago, you guys probably remember, if you've been around the channel for a while, that I famously switched from the Glock 19 to other handguns when I came to the realization that I live in a northern state where we have pretty serious winters at times. It gets really cold, and I do carry and use very thick gloves in my Jeep just in case it gets so cold outside I want to put some gloves on. That happened. It was a really cold winter day. I left my outdoor research gloves on. I went to draw my Glock 19 from its holster, went to go put my finger in the trigger guard, and I couldn't get my finger into the trigger guard with the thick glove on. If I pushed it in, it started to push back on the trigger, and also it was disabling the internal safety or the passive safety on the trigger. So if I would have pushed hard enough, there's a possibility I could have fired the gun just by trying to force my gloved hand or gloved finger into the trigger guard. Trigger guards on the Glocks are just too small for a gloved hand. And so I'm like, ooh, I need to rethink that. And I started looking at different carry options. Now, with that being said, the Glock 19 is probably one of the best carry handguns out there. It's a perfect marriage between size, weight, capacity. It's 9mm. It's just a great carry handgun. I'm just saying it's not right for me. I'm not saying it's a bad choice. It isn't. It's a great choice if this is what you want to carry. Except for when the spent cases fly back and hit you in the face, which is a problem I've had with Glocks for many years. So a few years back, a handgun came onto the market from SIG called the P365. And the handgun was really interesting to me because it was so small. It was smaller than the Glock 19. It could carry a 10-round flush fit magazine or a 12-round slightly extended magazine, but still a very small profile pistol, polymer frame striker fired. It was just, back then I was saying this is the future. This is going to become a popular carry option. Now back then in the early days, the P365 had all sorts of functional issues, which I documented extensively here on the Military Arms channel. People said, why do you keep buying these things if they're junk? Because SIG makes rolling changes. And I wanted to do my part to apply pressure to SIG to fix the problems that we were finding. A bunch of people were finding problems with them and make the gun a better handgun. And today it's an outstanding handgun. And they have different models available. So I start off with the original P365, and then you move up to the X Macro and things like that that actually have a 17-round capacity, but the guns are getting closer and closer to the size of a Glock 19. Still a bit smaller, still a very good carry option, but you know, there's other stuff out there. You got the Hellcat, and then you have the Glock 43X that I have here. But the Glock 43X is another handgun, and I brought this one out because I forgot to bring a P365 or an XL or an X Macro. But I did bring this one out, and this is just kind of speaking to this whole genre of firearms. It's the very small compact pistol that this one modified uses 15-round magazines. And so again, this is kind of the future. Very small, lightweight handgun, less than an inch thick. It's just a very easy gun to carry. Now, unfortunately, the Glock 43X and all of its derivatives have that really small trigger guard once again, so a gloved hand just isn't going to work with this handgun. This is even smaller than the Glock 19. And so this is not a gun that I would carry outside of the summer months. For the short time that I carried it, I quickly realized it wasn't the handgun I wanted. But Glock, for whatever reason, stuck with the polymer magazines, and they had limited capacity. Shield Arms came out with a steel or a metal magazine that holds 15 rounds that you have to change the mag release to a metal mag release, because the metal one will start to chip away at that polymer mag release and the gun will stop working. So you swap out the mag release, use these new Shield magazines, and that would give you 15 plus rounds of capacity. These are great handguns, but it has issues like the trigger guard, things like that, that I'm just not comfortable with. Now, many times I'll carry either strong side or appendix, depending on the situation, time of year, clothing I'm wearing, things like that. If I'm riding a motorcycle, if I'm not. Appendix carry is more dangerous than other types of carry. I'm not going to deny that. You have to be very well rehearsed. Now, one thing with appendix carry is it's very unforgiving. You have an ND, you're probably going to kill yourself. Ambulances are going to get to you in time probably to save you. If you hit that femoral artery, you're done. And so striker fired safetyless pistols like this, many people would say, really aren't the best choice for appendix carry. I've carried these appendix quite a bit. I'm not scared to, but is it the best idea? When you're out on the range firing, the problem isn't carrying it appendix. The problem comes about when you get a little bit too lazy and you go back to reholster. That's when accidents can happen. You can get a shirt tail into the trigger guard, you push it down, boom, gun goes off, all sorts of things. You have to be very, very slow back into the holster if you're carrying appendix. You probably should be slow back in the holster no matter what, but you get my point. So I was thinking, well, current thinking is I'm going to move away from the striker fired handguns, the polymer frame pistols like this, and maybe move back to a double action, single action pistol. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'll show you which handgun I'm currently carrying, and we'll get back to the Shadow 2, why I probably won't wind up carrying it. So the 1911 was my first center-fired handgun when I was a much younger man. So I love the 1911. The 1911 is an iconic handgun, great ergonomics, shoots great, available in a number of different cartridges, 9mm, 10mm, 45 ACP, and everything in between. But one of the reasons why I'm not carrying the Staccato, and I was carrying this past winter quite a bit. In the winter, you can get away with a big handgun like this with a coat. It hides it pretty effectively. But one thing I don't like about 1911s with ambi safeties is this enlarged safety on this side. I kept finding every time I just habitually, when I'm carrying a 1911, I just reach back periodically and check the status of the safety to make sure it's on. And I kept finding with the Staccato and its ambi safety that my safety kept getting brushed off. And I don't like that. Now the gun has the trigger covered in the holster. It's not going to fire, but I still don't like the fact that this ambi safety is on there. So unless I change the safety on the Staccato, I'm really not going to carry it much anymore, simply because I can't stand that safety being out there getting brushed against my clothing and constantly knocking that safety off. Now, that's not to say I can't change the safety. I can. I just don't want to get into a really expensive, nice handgun and start changing out parts if I don't have to. So this thing's going to be relegated to range duty going forward. I love Staccatos, great 1911s, but I'm not going to mess with the trigger on it. So my favorite or my preferred double action, single action carry handgun is the CZ P01 Compact. This handgun is an outstanding handgun. This one's been cagenized, which means I have replaced the trigger in it, gives it a much better trigger pull on double action and single action. But this handgun has a number of features that I like about it. First of all, it's very lightweight. It's about the same size as a Glock 19, uses a double stack magazine, is 9mm of course, but it has a hammer drop safety on it. So when you load the weapon, you run the slide, you can safely drop the hammer. It goes to a half cock position. This gun also has an internal firing pin safety, so even if you were to drop this gun, it would break that sear point on the hammer, allowing the hammer to go forward to hit the firing pin. The firing pin has a block on it that would keep the gun from firing. And when you're going to reholster a handgun like this, if you're out shooting, this weapon is loaded. If I'm out shooting, I want to make it safe. Drop that hammer, I hear the click, then I can go to put it back into appendix, but when I do it, I can put my thumb over the back of the hammer. If anything gets into the trigger guard and starts pushing on that trigger, it'll immediately transfer to the hammer and push on my thumb, and I know to stop pushing. That when that hammer starts coming back into my thumb, I'm like, ooh, something's pulling the trigger. Stop pushing. You got plenty of time to stop it from happening. Now there are little plates that I've picked up over the years that go on the back of Glock 19s. You can put your thumb on the back of the plate of the Glock 19. If you go to reholster it and you start pushing on the trigger, you'll feel that plate move against your finger. Same type of feedback. It's just I don't care for it. It flops around when the gun's firing. It's just a little bit odd. But if you're going to carry a Glock 19, you might want to look into one of those little plates. So anyway, the handgun is just outstanding. But one thing it lacks from the factory is an optics cut. I like red dot sights on handguns. If you don't, that's fine too. But, you know, as far as iron sights go, this is easily my favorite concealed carry handgun for all the safety reasons I've explained. Now, with the double action, single action handgun, your safety on this isn't some sort of a manual safety. It's like a double action revolver. Double action revolvers generally don't have manual safeties on them because the double action is your safety. That heavy trigger pull keeps you from accidentally touching a round off. And then when it goes to single action, you're already ready to use it because you fired the first round double action, you're already shooting. When you go to make it safe, just hit that safety, drops the hammer back down, put it in the holster, good to go. So it's just a great carry option, and that's why I've come back to the CZ P01. Why didn't I say Shadow 2 Compact? Why am I not taking the latest and greatest, the Shadow 2 Compact, and replacing my P01 Compact with it? I'm glad you asked. So here is my classic, if you will, CZ P01 Compact. This handgun is a gun that I've carried for a long time, and I just love the CZ75. It's easily one of the best double stack 9mm handguns in the world. It was one of the first coming out around 1975, and you know, during the communism era, the Soviet era, it was very hard to get a hold of them at times, but now that all that's gone, these things are flowing into the country, that being CZ products, and so it's an outstanding carry option if you want a double action, single action pistol. But it has a number of things that I like about it that I don't like, sadly, about what I presume is ultimately to be its replacement, and that is the Shadow 2 Compact. Now, this one doesn't have the name on it on the slide, CZ75 Shadow 2 Compact. It's just called the Shadow 2 Compact, but as you can see, the handguns are clearly related, right? They've changed the slide design, things like that. They use the same magazines. They've enlarged the trigger guard, which I like on this. Nice big trigger guard. It's already big, but they've just squared it out, made it a little bit bigger. Let me go ahead and bring the hammer down so you can better see what I'm talking about there. So you have nice large trigger guard on it. You have an accessory rail underneath here that's 1913. The P01 has a slightly different rail, but it's still present. But, you know, and the slide rides inside the frame, all that stuff. And both are fairly lightweight. So if I take the weight of my unloaded CZ75 P01 Compact, that's a mouthful. Let's call it the P01. The weight on this one is 24.6 ounces. The CZ Shadow 2 Compact is 27.8 ounces. So this one's a little heavier, but even though you can tell the weight difference by picking them up, it's not massive. It's marginal in terms of the overall weight difference. The ergonomics are very similar. You have a slightly more pronounced hump back here. It's a little bit flatter on the Shadow 2, but both guns feel very, very good. One of the things I loved about the CZ75, including the compact versions, is that really ergonomic pistol grip on it. It's like the 1911 to 9mm. If it doesn't fit your hand, you're the odd man out, because most people will pick one of these up and go, ooh, that feels really, really good. Now, both handguns are double action, single action, but there's some key differences if you're considering the CZ Shadow 2, either the full size or the compact, as a concealed carry gun. And this is why I'm not going to carry this handgun, sadly. Now, people will say, and they said it on X, well, you didn't do your research. No, I didn't really. I knew I have a CZ Shadow 2 full size. When the compact came out, I just wanted one. And so I didn't care what the features were. I was going to get one regardless. But when I went to go pick it up and I started playing with it, I realized very quickly, I'm never going to carry this thing. And here's why. So let's take a look at the original P01 Compact first. I'm going to go ahead and unload the pistol, make sure it's empty. I'm going to disassemble it. CZs are a little bit different. You have to pull the slide to the rear. You have little marks back on the slide. You won't be able to see them from where you're at right now, but you can just use a magazine to pop your cross pin out. And then the two halves come apart. So aluminum lightweight lower. And here you're going to notice one key element of the design. There is a firing pin block in the slide, which means if you go to try to push on the firing pin without the trigger being pulled, when you pull the trigger, a little bar comes up and pushes that safety out of the way. There is no way that firing pin will move forward far enough to hit the primer. I'm sorry. So I'm pushing on the firing pin now with all my might, and it's not protruding out the front in such a way that it would fire it if something were to hit the firing pin. The only way it can move forward is to push up on this plunger, then the firing pin's free to travel forward. It's called a passive firing pin safety. You'll also notice this handgun has no manual safety. It simply has a decocker on the left-hand side of the gun. And I showed you earlier in the video how that is used. Okay, so when you load the weapon, make it ready to carry, you can hit the decocker, safely drop the hammer on a live round, and put it in the holster, and you're off to the races. Set that aside. The Shadow 2 Compact comes apart in much the same way. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it's empty. And I'm going to take it back to its little disassembly lines there. You'll eventually learn how to do this. Use your magazine to pop the pin out. And then this just slides off. It comes off. And again, lightweight lower. It's a little bulkier because of the 1913 rail, but it's still fairly lightweight. But you'll notice over here on the slide, what's missing? It's that passive firing pin safety is missing. So what does that mean? Well, that means, unlike the P01 Compact, if I push on this firing pin, let's see if Jason can see this with the camera, it will protrude from the firing pin hole on the breech face and the gun will fire. So what that means is that if anything strikes this firing pin with the trigger not even being pulled or whatever, if something hits that firing pin, like the hammer, if the sear breaks, you're carrying it and you drop it, it's on half cock, the sear breaks, hammer hits the firing pin, gun goes boom. Now in theory, the Compact P01 can't do that. The firing pin safety keep the firing pin from contacting the primer. That's a major problem for me. Now look, I don't go around and people are going to say in the comments, oh, I just don't drop my guns. I'm glad you're perfect. People drop guns all the time. Ever been to a competition? I've seen more guns hit the ground than I can count on both hands in competitions that I've been to. So it does happen. When you get in a hurry, you do drop things, especially when you're scared, you're amped up on adrenaline, things happen. Bad things happen. If this thing falls on the ground, goes off, muzzle up, guess who gets hit with a bullet potentially? Me or somebody else that didn't need to be shot. So that's a major problem for me. I like those internal safeties. Now, granted, 100 years ago, we didn't use those types of safeties. It was a different world back then. We had the technology to make the firearm safe. So why take it out of the original design? What were you doing? Now, I haven't spoken to anybody at CZ. They don't talk to me anymore. But one of the reasons I think that they do this, I know this is the case with 1911s, it's lazy engineering. The trigger is generally better if you don't have part of the trigger that has to come up and push a spring-loaded plunger out of the way. That increases the weight of the trigger pull and also can make it stagey and creepy and things like that. Simple solution is just leave the plunger out. The trigger's nice all by its own. But that's lazy engineering. You can still get a nice trigger with the plunger safety. You just have to do a little bit more engineering. Now, I don't know if that's why they did it, but I suspect that's at least part of it because the original Shadow 2 was designed to be a competition handgun. The Compact is a compact competition handgun. In my view, it is not qualified to be used as a concealed carry firearm for that reason, but there's more. I'm gonna go ahead and put the gun back together and show you another thing I don't like about it. I do like the captive recoil spring. That's a nice touch. I mean, there's a lot of nice things about the gun. Don't get me wrong. The Shadow 2 is a beautiful pistol, compact or full size. I do like them. It's just, I'm not gonna carry them when I have a better option. And that better option is a fraction of the cost. So the Shadow 2 is you know, $1,169, I think, is what this one cost me, and that was with a 10% discount code. These, the CZ P01 Compacts, they can be had for $600. So literally about half the price of the Shadow 2, but it has all the safety features that I want. When you load this weapon, put it around the chamber, there's no magazine in it, and you want to put the hammer down, there's no decocker. Pushing down these levers, these ambi safety levers, doesn't decock the pistol. There's no decocker in it. So that leaves you to putting the hammer down. Now, I've seen people on YouTube talking about, oh, you can carry the Shadow 2 safely. You just got to know what you're doing. It's a skill thing. And they proceed to show you thumbing the hammer down like that. I can't think of a faster way to have an ND than trying to thumb a hammer down in a hurry and getting complacent where you just let it slip and the gun goes off and you didn't intend it to. There's a reason why hammer drop safeties are a thing, because to put the hammer down safely, you just push the lever. Think of a P226 SIG or something like that, or the P01 Compact. This, the only safe way to do it is to point it in a safe direction, pinch the hammer, and ease it forward, release the trigger after it's released, and let it fall to half cock. There's no reason to let it fall all the way down where it's actually resting on the firing pin. okay? That's a bad idea. If you have a round in the chamber, at least keep it on half cock. Now, that's not going to keep the gun from firing if it's dropped on the hammer and the sear breaks. It's still going to fire. But definitely don't release the hammer to the point where it's literally resting on the firing pin. That would be like carrying a single action Colt with a round of the hammer and the hammer resting on the firing pin. That's how you have accidents. Now, another thing that makes no sense to me with the Shadow 2 is when the hammer's all the way down resting on the firing pin, which is unsafe to begin with, you can't put the safety on, okay? But I don't want a safety on a double action pistol because the double action is a safety, as I've already mentioned. But when you put it to half cock, which if you're going to carry this would be a preferred method of carrying it with the firing pin not being touched by the hammer, now you can put it on safe. Now look at the safeties on this gun. They're ambi, which I've already talked about the problems with that. Set the gun up for if you're right-handed or left-handed. There's no need for ambi controls. But there's no extended magazine or safety lever in the box, so it just has these little flat paper-thin safety levers. So with me, with my large thumbs, if I accidentally knock the safety on, which would be entirely possible, there's no real detent, it just moves freely. If you knock that safety on and you go to pull your weapon in a heated moment, you bring the gun up and start pulling the trigger, that's as far as you get. Now you got to troubleshoot. You're already amped up on adrenaline. You're probably scared. You've made the decision to use lethal force, but your gun's not firing. Now your focus goes off the threat to the gun to solve the problem like, oh yeah, safety. And now you fired. By that point, you're probably in trouble or dead. So the safety makes no sense. This gun should not have a safety on it. It just needs a hammer drop. It probably doesn't need the extended mag release, but I can live without that. You can take it off. It has a little screw head on it. I just don't understand the gun. And I definitely would put a passive safety on the firing pin. There's no reason to take it off for this gun. Now, to its credit, the gun shoots very nice, just as the P01 Compact does, but this one is factory cut for a red dot sight, which I will eventually put one on here. So, in the end, the CZ Shadow 2 is not my choice for a concealed carry gun. Now, if you have one and you're carrying it and watching the video, you do you. I'm not telling you what to carry and what not to carry. I'm simply telling you why I've chosen not to carry this handgun. It's a fine defensive handgun, just as an early 1911 with no firing pin safety on it is a fine carry gun if that's what you want to carry. I choose to pick slightly safer products because there are better products on the market than guns that were designed 100 plus years ago. So anyway, I'll give you some final thoughts here in a minute about the CZ P01 Compact. I'd like to thank our friends over at Federal for supplying the ammunition for today's video free of charge. I've been shooting Federal my entire life. Love the ammunition, great people, great company, outstanding quality ammunition. Many times at affordable price if you get the American Eagle stuff, which is what we're shooting today. 115 grain American Eagle 9mm. So one thing I've noticed about the Shadow 2 that's a little bit different than my P01 in terms of handling is that it's a little bit more muzzle heavy feeling. Not super noticeable, but when you pick it up, when you shoot the two side by side, you will notice this gun's got a little bit more muzzle weight to it. Now, some people will say that's not a bad thing, right? Because muzzle weight out towards the end will help you manage recoil a little bit better. So I'm just pointing out that observation. Now to make this gun ready, I'm gonna take the magazine, insert it in the handgun, charge the weapon. Now it's single action. Now, of course, I can put the safety on, carry it in single action mode, with the trigger covered in a good holster. I personally wouldn't do that, but you can do it. The safety on this is very thin and it doesn't have a positive detent on it like a good 1911, which is why I wouldn't carry it single action. Same reason I wouldn't carry a Browning high power, just a mushy safety lever, just not my personal preference. So to carry this, I would have to now, without a decocker, make the gun double action ready for carry. That means point it in a safe direction, pinch the hammer, don't thumb it down, pinch the hammer and release the trigger and let it rest at the half cock position right there. So that's about as safe as the gun's going to be. First shot would be double action, and then every subsequent shot is single action. Now, if you wanted to make the weapon safe to reholster, you just got into a gunfight, whatever, you didn't dump your magazine. Now you have to either put it on safe, like I told you, which is probably the best option, or ease that hammer back down and then put it in the holster. Now on the range training, that would be the preferred method, at least in how I would use a double action, single action handgun. So in summation, I'm going back to carrying my P01 Compact. I love CZ handguns, they're outstanding. I even like the CZ Shadow 2. It's a great handgun. It's just not something I personally am ready to carry. I just think the less expensive, far less expensive P01 Compact is a better solution. It's lighter, has passive safeties, has the same capacity, uses the same magazine as the CZ Shadow 2 or vice versa. It's just an outstanding option. The only thing is if you want a red dot sight, you'll have to send it out to get it slide cut, but you can do that. I have two of these. Generally, when I have committed to a handgun for carry, I'll get two of the handguns to keep them configured identically. So if one goes down, I need to send it in for service, or I want to have it slide cut, I'll have a backup carry piece. And so I do have 2 of these. I probably will send them out one at a time to get slide cut for a red dot sight, because I do want that functionality that's on the Shadow 2, but I also want my passive safeties in the decocker, which the Shadow 2 lacks. All right, guys, I look forward to your comments down below. Please don't take this as me ripping on the CZ Shadow 2. I am not. I'm just explaining to you why I've chosen not to carry it. It's not a major letdown. I thought it was in the beginning, but I tend to overreact when I get upset about something. But it's not a major letdown. It's a nice handgun. So if you're looking for one, keep looking at them, but just go into it knowing everything I've pointed out in this video. Thank you for watching. If you guys would like to support us here at the Military Arms channel, the best way to do that is to become part of our Patreon family. There's a link in the video description below. Right here on YouTube, you got the thanks button, the subscribe button. Hit either one of those buttons. You can support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Please swing by, check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 16 years of support. We'll talk to you guys soon.